their demands. Myself and one of the BSU members was Danny Glover at the time. I mean, you'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't be, who was on the campuses that are known and people of notoriety today that we work with. So the issue there was ethnic studies. It was also the fact that students' funds weren't there. It was also the fact that there was discrimination in the classrooms. There was also the fact that there was enough student housing. So the whole idea of bringing these demands in what they called a peaceful manner to the administration, they decided they would not budge. They were not going to create an ethnic studies department because the first African American studies, which was a catalyst for the rest of the universities, started on Grove Street when Merritt College was there before it moved up into the hills of Oakland. So that was a catalyst for ethnic studies in universities. I worked with the people at UC Berkeley, people at San Francisco State, wherever there was need. So the idea was just not learning the history of black people, but we want to know the history of all of us. How did we contribute to America? And the university system didn't want to do it. It was an amazing time. You're talking 6 months. You're talking professors being beaten and sent to the hospital. Same thing at UC Berkeley. It was a time of total involvement, and unfortunately, there was a lot of that going on in terms of the response and reaction, but that is the history of San Francisco State University, which then you had all over the country. The situation, remember what happened at Kent State with the 4 students, and they were white students who were shot by the National Guard. So the movement on the campus was very vivid, very alive, which spread into the community on all levels.
And how is, or why is education on ethnic studies important for consciousness?
That's a good one. The reason is because if I don't know where I came from, then I definitely don't know where I'm going. If I don't know my history, or we like to phrase it, our story, then I cannot know what I can do in the future. I need to know the truth. So this is so important because it also tells and explains to people, and they internalize how to think, not what to think. And once they grasp those concepts, and we actually have a prologue to that, which is the opening class, 66 fallacies and questions about the Black Panther Party, and then it goes into 5 areas that talk about the repression, the survival programs. Once people go through that, we actually have an 18-module class or course that would take a year, and it's geared for elementary school kids. If you go on our website, the first thing you see is an interview with some of the Seattle former members with children. It's children have a chance to talk to real Black Panthers and ask them questions. That was the beginning of the educational curve for them, but it was on their demand also. So these are the reasons why, because once you do that, you create a force, the next generation, who analyze these things. They don't take things for granted. We used to say, you see the forest and not just the tree in front of you. You really begin to understand what's going on, and then when you make the decision to move, it's in unison, and it is one that's going to create what we call real results for change.
What are some of the stereotypes associated with Black Panther?
One thing that us original members, alumni members, elders were sick of the image of the black leather jacket and the beret, and unfortunately, you had a lot of groups across the country calling themselves the new Black Panthers, the new this and that. There's no such thing. And what most important of all, not equipped in understanding the ideology and the philosophy and how we did things and not knowing that. So you're putting this on with the romanticism, and you're going out there out of anger, projecting that image. 1970, we came out of all the black leather jackets and all that. We were dressing like everyone else in the community as we embarked upon that. So that romanticism, that issue with the guns, was the FBI and the federal agencies took that and ran with it to create fear amongst people in the suburbs and even in our own community as gun-toting, dumb, crazy black criminals who aren't doing anything. Meanwhile, we're feeding their kids at a breakfast program. That's when the contradiction started.
What do people not realize about the Black Panther Party in terms of community service, in terms of programming, and what you just said about the breakfast?
One thing that they don't realize is that the re-education of all the community survival programs. I remember before they were all documented, we would run around and say, we had 30 community programs. And the Stanford Archives and Arizona State University said, no, we've investigated, we've documented, it's like 63. And I think we missed some. So all over the country, free ambulance service. We simply, in our analysis and the way we thought, we read everything in the world. Yeah, we read Marxist Leninism, we read Karl Marx, socialism. We studied what was going on in China and Korea, Cuba, Frantz Fanon. We had a list of 38 books, and you had to spend 2 hours a day reading. So it's always a constant education concept for us to come to a conclusion. So as time went along, we looked at what was going on, defining our society using the concept of social science. And then we adopted the concept as the ideology evolved. We called it going from black nationalism, I'm black and I'm brown, to revolutionary nationalism and internationalism. This is a struggle for all of us, to revolutionary intercommunalism. The world is one big community. They use the term village now. We said that way back when. It said all of us are being oppressed by imperialism, because you have people in other countries that look like me are in cooperation with those who are controlling everything. And you look at it, they're doing the same thing to their people based upon the agenda that imperialism and supremacy has, right? So these are very important things to us as far as those programs, and the importance of now informing people. You should see people's faces when they learn the real truth about everything that we work with, from the housing, from affordable housing to the first senior housing in America, before paratransit, the SAFE program, the health clinics. Everything that we did was answering issues in the community, and then it spread from community to community to the Native Americans and to the poor. Everybody adapted what they saw, and then what it did, it dissolved all lines of myths, fears, because they're working together, and you have the same problems in the community. You become brothers and sisters united as one people in America, and that's where we're going today.
That reminds me of racial solidarity. Can you speak to why that's important? And
our take on the concept of like racial solidarity, we're talking about human solidarity. We legacy keepers, the network has adopted the concept of, we look at it this way, across all political lines. There's humans and there's inhumans, right? And we could have fun writing down what we consider to be a human being. Take away all the politics in line. What do you want for your family? A decent house, a decent life, food for my kids, them to go to school, good medical care. You'll hear that echo from any population, no matter where they live. So when you're able to talk and come up and explain those concepts, they're like, well, you have the same idea I have. I mentioned to you earlier, I've talked to people from both parties, Republicans and Satura, you're absolutely right. We all basically want the same things. So if we erase these innuendos, this feeling of xenophobia, nativism, and all the things that are taught to people to divide them, so those very people who are wealthy will never work with those people that they're pitting against you or me or anyone else. They'll never invite them to their house, to their country club. And they'll tell their kids they better not invite them to their house and be their friend. But they're used for that way. We took all that away by posing those questions and teaching people to think for themselves, where they say, we realize we've been all duped. As Malcolm would say, you've been hoodwinked and bamboozled.
How similar is the Black Lives Matter movement to the Black Panthers movement?
The Black Lives Matter movement, actually, it started off just with black people in the black community. You remember, we go back, and if you ask me the names of everybody or anybody, I couldn't remember. But the young men who were being killed by, incidents of police being murdered by the police, until the situation with George. You don't know the effect that it had. I got calls from black males and people in their 60s and 70s literally crying, literally said, this is just too much. All of America is seeing this. So many people were angry. And I got 1,000 calls you can imagine, because here you go. Wait, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna get out there and get our... I said, hold on, that's not what the party was about. I said, no. I said, I understand your anger. So we started getting calls, and then in September, we began holding public classes on Wednesdays. And then we had, out of that came this unbelievable group. And right now we've had hundreds of people all over the country want to log on to these classes, which we'll have in the colleges, and even some of the professors who don't know anything about, don't know anything about Black history or the history of the movement, the social movement. We're aiding them on that aspect too. And I could go on and on about the network, but I wanted to give you an idea of the type of personnel that are involved: medical people, politicians, progressive people who want to see change. So by us coming together on one accord, one concept, one idea, we can really make some real changes and teach the community how to sustain themselves. No more handouts, no more umbilical cords. That time is over. And this is what we were teaching when they did everything they could to stop us from doing that very thing. There might be 5, 10, 15,000 people. If you look at some of the historical films, you'll see that. And it started off where it became local, and Lisa Pearlman wrote a book, and it was talking about the trial of the century, which was the trial of Huey P. Newton, a black man put on trial for the murder of a police officer, Officer Fry, in October of 1967 in West Oakland. But of course, it was exonerated. At the time when the other officer, who was his partner, testified, I never saw him with a weapon at all. Never saw him. They gustled. You ended up getting shot, and that was it. And so when they came, the court trial went on for a couple of years. Charles Gary, iconic lawyer, was a lawyer, and he was exonerated finally and acquitted of that particular charge. But just like in any situation, this is what we explain to people. When you are a person who is involved in changing, the demonization continues. So any kind of way that they can stop you if they're not in agreement. If I write your history, I am not going to allow you the opportunity to change it and change the narrative, because it destabilizes our control and also points out the fallacies that are untrue about any movement or anybody's action in this country. So we learned that a long time ago. So that's the front of the courthouse over there. Now across the street, you see 1200 Lakeshore. That's right over there. Interesting story about that. How you doing? All right. 1200 Lakeshore. That building over there at the top was a penthouse where Huey P. Newton stayed.
I knew it.
And a lot of people looked at that, and actually, it's so interesting because now thousands and thousands of dollars. He actually stayed on the top, well, not the very top, but on one of the top floors. It was for security reasons. When he first got out, the first time he got out of prison, he was taken to Walter and Amelia, his parents. Walter was his dad. He was a Baptist preacher. And as a matter of fact, I was responsible for their well-being. I would pick them up, at the time he'd have make sure they got home, take them to the store. A lot of times I'd have a caravan. People followed us everywhere we went. But it was Bert Snyder, who was a famous Hollywood director, who paid for that. The reason is that when he was first taken to his house, mother's parents' house, you couldn't get any sleep. And also, not to mention, there'd be telephone trucks with guys listening on every phone call. Then he took him around the lake where you have the buzz-in buildings, but there people all night long would camp out. So the decision was made not only for his safety, was 1200 Lakeshore. We figured the top floor, outside of being let in and sneaking, and yes, there were incidents where they had planned on killing him. There was actually a shootout in the hall. He didn't come out. It wasn't a shootout. It was planned for him to come out. There was a situation one time where his wife, Gwen Newton, came in, and there were people actually in there with silencers going through the information. They were agents. This is all documented. You can look this all up. But the fact of the matter is, we felt that Normally, you couldn't get to someone unless you wanted to be Tom Cruise on a building like that and climb the glass, right? So it was all about safety. And the party was not paying for that. So that thing about him living in luxury, that was the biggest fallacy in the world. And you know how much the apartment cost back then?
$600.
Add $50. Imagine that. Now it's like what, 5 or 6,000, 7,000. It was $650 to live in that building back then.
Penthouse is $10,000.
Now it's 10,000. I think back then it was like penthouse was like maybe about $900 to $1,000 back in that period of time. Boy, how inflation is taking place. Man.
Yeah.
So that was a very important aspect of where he stayed, and it was amazing that people understood that fact. And then, of course, the rumor went around that he was staying in luxury, that money was being spent from the party. What money? But this was part of COINTELPRO. One thing that they did was they brought some of their best Soviet Cold War agents back for the purpose of what we call writing letters. Did anyone ever see the Seberg movie, the Jane Seberg movie? Oh, I think so. That's the one where her relationship, how they pretty much drove her out of the mine. They used the same tactics against her. Writing letters, creating falsehoods, creating false conversations. They're very good, and that's what we call dividing and conquering. Seberg was one of the people, she was one of the actresses who supported the party. The movie doesn't tell the story in all its correctness, but she was one of those. And of course, you know the story of Jane Fonda, and several others who were part of that, always contributing and working for the interest and contributing money. Our bail funds are unbelievable, millions of dollars. But we had committees that would come up with the money. Imagine what we could have done with that money in the programs if they had left us alone and allowed us to do it. As a matter of fact, many police officers and units across the country thought we were doing good work. Did a conference 2001, former police lieutenants and captains told us, we thought you were doing good work. It was the federal government that gave us our mandate and said, this is what you have to do. So hearing this testimony, we were alleviating crime, we were stopping drug trades, we were doing a lot of their work for us. So a lot of police lieutenants and captains told me in that conference, we liked what you're doing, but it was the federal government and the federal agency said, this is what we want you to do. They literally came in and took over departments and gave them mandates on what they're supposed to do to destroy us of a vendetta of J. Edgar Hoover. It's amazing, it really was. So, and over here we have the courthouse. Yeah. Okay. Get up here.
I like that.
That was it. It was amazing, amazing. You have people lining up here, all the way down. I remember the stance. We had the brothers would have the flags, the Black Panther flags, and there were various chants, which were like, "Black is beautiful, set our warrior free, free you." That was just one of many. But what started happening, as far as the eye could see, you couldn't drive through here, and it was every day. It was every day for months. People came from all over the country and all over the world because this was something that had finally been addressed concerning oppression of the black communities and people of color all over the country, and also the fact of the police brutality that was really rampant. I want to paint that picture for everybody. There were no police commissions. The judgment was done by the people within the department, and that person would be back on duty the next day going like this to people. You're next, you're next. This was the behavior that was taking place with departments. You have to remember there was no psychological test. There were signs in the South. In two departments they were recruiting for. Los Angeles Police Department and Oakland Police Department. So along with the migration, people from the 60s also came that wave of real supremacist former Klans people who were recruited and had the opportunity to join the police department. So obviously they brought that behavior and culture with them. And it was like open season in the black community. You couldn't even go to the city and have any say-so about what happened because they would turn around and say, we made a decision, it was justifiable homicide. I mean, this would be like the next day. So there was a point in time when people said, this has to stop. the first patrols began, they stood 20 feet back. The UEP Newton was a law student, so they would read the legal rights. Mr. Jones, according to section so-and-so of the penal code, you have the right to not have them open your car door. You know, this is not only black people, but if somebody in the community got stuff, you can be white, anybody. Hold on. We're here to let you know that you have these rights, and they will not abuse you. Do not let them go in your car according to section so-and-so. And they would get angry because a lot of those officers did not know the law. So this brought a whole new question of who you recruiting, what kind of officers are you bringing in, and are they fair and just, or they have the right mindset? And of course, they didn't. So this was an unbelievable time in history that really, when his trial, that's when the Black Panther Party started growing, because then it was local. It was relegated just to Oakland, even when they came to the Capitol. But after Bobby Hutton's death, and then UEP knew that situation went global. And the attention on America of a black man being on trial for murdering a police officer drew worldwide attention, and the rest began to grow. People from all walks of life, students, progressives, elected officials, lawyers, all came to the table because finally they saw something they can plug into. And like I said, our understanding and the way we thought kept on evolving. How are we going to include everybody? And how are we going to address real situations? So that's why our knowledge and our involvement in how we thought, we would tell people what you think is revolution today may not be revolution tomorrow. The revolution that we have now, first, is the revolution of education, of revolving out old thoughts, old ways, and planting new concepts that are inclusive for everybody, that are going to change things for the whole nation. You know, bring everybody in America to the picture. You want to make this country really great? Then bring everybody in the picture. You become unstoppable. You become the strongest country in the world because everybody in America is taken care of and everybody's contributing. What is wrong with that formula? So you could come to your own conclusions based upon that. But that historic period, this courthouse still is known throughout the world. And while UEP Newton was locked up here for 2 years, he wasn't on top. He was actually in the bottom. They have the so-called soul breaker cell. You know, we'll keep you in there and you'll go crazy. And let's think about this. You lock anybody up for 2, 15, 20 years, and maybe America will understand what it does to an individual since they've been locked down in COVID for a year. Imagine what a man or woman who's locked down for 20 years and then DNA testing or something finds out you're innocent. Imagine the mental state and how strong they must be to hold on to that when they're in the cell, when they can't leave and go to the store, and how America has realized it is impossible for me to exist this way. We are social animals, we're social creatures. So all these things I'm mentioning are very important in how people perceive and see, and that trial was the trial of the century. And you can go back and you can look at all kinds of videos and tapes where he's speaking and different people in the crowd and who was involved. And the fact of the matter is the message got out to everyone that something must change. There's something happening in Oakland, California that eventually spread throughout the nation and the world. We had no idea that we had 30, 40 chapters and branches around the world until 2016. The Mizrahi Jews in Tel Aviv, Israel, had a Black Panther Party. The folks in the Dravidians, the dark-skinned Indians in India, formed a Black Panther Party. England, all of Europe, Asia, Africa, it was amazing. You're talking about really being humbled. And it wasn't about the name, the Black Panther Party. It was about the ideology and ideas of taking care of your community. We all are human beings. Let's make sure that we take care of our communities and we take care of ourselves. And it takes away all the stereotypes of your existence and my fear of you. And that was that working relationship. We're establishing that again. So this was when I would come down. And I also want to let you guys know there was one artist who was a catalyst. It was James Brown. That one song that came out. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. You have a right to live. And that was a consciousness thing for everybody. It's like, I've been told I shouldn't be proud because now I'm proud. And people started learning who they were. They started learning about their culture. They started all over the country addressing issues that affected everyone. So it was a catalyst right here at this courthouse, the trial of Dr. Huey P. Newton. With a vote, but at the same time explaining to them why we were doing what was being done and why it was for their benefit and how we could have these concepts ongoing. Many people don't know, right off of Jeffrey 14, we had a clothing factory and a shoe factory. That's how we were able to give away clothes and shoes, but the process was going to be, we're going to open it up, hire people in the community, and do a similar thing in every community across the country. Bring our own people into their own hiring. First of all, stabilize people with their basic needs, and then sell our products here and all over. As a matter of fact, because our relationship with China and a lot of other countries, they were going to buy our products even way back then. Because, you know, the trip that we made when we went to 1970, it was amazing because he was invited, the Black Panther Party was invited before Kissinger could get Richard Nixon in. And they told him that they wanted to see the Black Panther Party first. It's history, look it up, but that course didn't set well with Richard Nixon. But here was an amazing point in time, was that this is the auditorium where Bobby Seale announced his candidacy for mayor. And I know it was packed to the rafters. And at the same time, in there we always say, giving things away to people is wonderful. Sustaining them is wonderful. But if you're not teaching them, look, we're doing this because it's necessary. We're doing this to help sustain you and our community. But we're going to talk about how we can sustain ourselves. And that's truly what it's about. So when you're doing things for people, you're encouraging them, look, we're doing it because we have to. We're doing it because it's necessary. But this is the reasons why. And this is why you want to engage with us and the rest of the community so we can make this permanent. We don't want to be just giving it away. We want to make sure that everybody has it for them on a consistent basis, no matter what it may be. Real institutions in the community. So that day I'll never will forget, and we can cross over here to Laney. I'm trying to figure out where you had to walk up those. We can go around the front area, huh?
Oh, yeah.
That way you don't have to, everyone go up all these
Oh,
stairs.
no, you don't want to go up. Where are you trying to go?
Just around. We didn't finish the tour. There were so many spots and locations throughout the city, and the history of what went on from the schools, the homes where the children lived, and the CDC, the 24-hour Child Development Center, the free health clinic in George Jackson Free Health Clinic in North Oakland. I mean, there was so much, you know, that we had to revise it to a 3.5-hour tour. Sound like Gilligan's Island, right? 3-hour tour. And it actually was ended up more than that. Here's Laney Plaza, as I like to call it. Right, Michelle? How many times have you walked this?
Oh, so many times.
How many years you go upstairs with just BSU and be nobody in there? I said, where's everybody? You can't do it.
This is where everything is supposed to happen.
Right in here.
Yep.
Yeah, right in here.
And to this day now, they still feed people right here.
Right in here.
Yeah.
I want you to imagine this whole area. And inside where the auditorium is just thousands of bags of groceries for everywhere you can walk. Just groceries everywhere. I want you to imagine thousands of people off the campuses, because one of my responsibilities was assigned by Dr. Newton to go back organize on the campuses right after Merritt College left Grove Street and went up on the hill. So I created the Black Student Alliance, which became the Student Alliance, from Latinas to the progressive white organizations on campus. We had 5,000 to 10,000 students. Then it went from the community colleges to UCLA, colleges all up and down the West Coast, all the way back to the East, as I was on campus. And by the way, I did maintain a 3.8 average, even while I was organizing at the point on the campuses. But what it did, it brought that next wave of conscious people and students to the table. So it took us all day and all night to the next morning to make sure that everything was correct for the big announcement of the actual campaign that took place, which was a prelude to one of our first survival conferences. Incidentally, a lot of the things that we did were duplicated in other chapters and branches all across the country. And what was so interesting, the whole concept of a rainbow coalition, even before Jesse, and by the way, Jesse was an early party member. just about everybody was engaged with us before they went into things that they did their own right. So for him and everybody else with the Rainbow Coalition simply meant we're bringing everybody in. We don't care who you are. If you feel that you are being denied in your community, we're going to tell you what we did. And you're going to organize your community. We'll be there to support it. Hear what I said? We didn't say we're going to come in there and help you and tell you what to do. We said, no, we're going to show you what we did, give you some knowledge, and then we'll support you 1,000 miles an hour to make sure that that happens. So we were able to bring that to bear, and that was duplicated all over the country. In some areas you had Native Americans, and you had Latinos. Some areas you had people, more immigrants. So even using that same formula of bringing everybody together on the common cause of everything from land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace reverberated throughout everywhere. And so when people look at that, and now that we're rolling this concept out again, and not only teaching that history, but how we thought, the thinking process is what gave us the resolve. And we learned, and I think back upon that period now, what we went through, it was unbelievable. We didn't know what we were getting into. We didn't know that they were going to come down. Like Dr. Newton says, I never thought we'd see one of our party members killed. I never thought that little Bobby. We didn't think like that. We thought, just like these people did, we're going to go out here and Americans going to listen. Then there became this backlash from the federal government because we were doing the right things. You never heard about Black Panther Party that was out there. They always accused us of the police confrontations and what have you. We never did that. The thing about it is we never ran out, tore up buildings. We didn't burn down nothing. We were organized. We were too busy feeding the kids. We were too busy creating health clinics. So this was the real story that is now 55 years later. I question how we here. So everybody should really, really think about that. And really, really see that what we're bringing to the table is the lost knowledge of real change. And embrace it, take it to heart, and let's move forward. So for us, it's surreal. You know, maybe one day we'll get a documentary like they're still on the front lines 50 plus years later. And this year is the 55th anniversary celebration of the founding of the party. We're going to do a lot of stuff. We got as much as we can online, and we can do things in the community. Hopefully by then, we'll all be able to get out, go to restaurants, and shake each other's hands and say, I'm glad to see you. Even the people you didn't initially like, you're glad to see anybody and to be out again. But this is what we're looking at, and we know that in our own minds, we have a purpose, and we owe it to those that are not here. We owe it to those that sacrifice and have the same ideas and ideology. We owe it to those who along the way were driven out of their minds. There are, yes, and that happened. I was talking to him earlier. If you've seen the Jane Secret movie, she was one of our supporters along with Jane Fonda and many others. But their tactics were always to try to destroy who you were and make you doubt whether you were sane or not. And that was a forte that they're very good at, but we weathered the storm. We're here now to tell the story in its truthfulness and all its correctness. So that's about it for Lady. If we want to...
Did you walk in the center?
Oh, you want to walk in the center?
Because that's where everything was?
Pretty much.
For the speed, thousands of them from here and all over the country help us prepare 15,000 bags of groceries with a chicken in every bag, right? That's an amazing feat.
It's something to be seen where you're giving that away and you're putting it together and the community's involved. From not only adults, but children. You had the kids and everybody. It became a real community issue. And the joy and the feeling and the hope that was in the community at that point in time was totally amazing. In terms of people finally said, we can really come together and do something together and make change.